Hello there YouTube, welcome back to Marcelian&Online, and this just in, you can purchase dungeon trinkets with the Dinars when they will be available at myth track level, by the way. The players have been listened to by the devs. It's fascinating how people can react when their loot is being threatened by a particular system and how quickly the devs can actually respond, which is a very wonderful thing that happened, and we're actually getting some cool changes to the Dinar system. Although there are a couple of problems still remaining when it comes to how this is approached, what this actually solves and what it doesn't solve still, and what is wrong with the community today. And you can let us know in the comment section below what your opinion about this is and why you probably will disagree with what I'm about to tell you. First of all, the Dinar system changes that affect us will be fairly similar to the raid ones. If you're a Mythic Plus players and you complete 4 Mythic Plus dungeons, you will gain access to 1 Puzzling Cartel Chips when they will be added, and you can buy with the appropriate currency the appropriate trinket at a track all the way up to hero track. If you want the myth track ones, you will need to also complete all the plus 12s in time, essentially unlocking the resilient key, and you'll be able to buy the myth track versions of those trinkets. This is where people are, of course, upset once again, and I actually disagree with their opinion, unfortunately. So let me explain as to why. People would want this myth track to be unlocked at plus 10s, because that's where you get the myth track gear from plus 10s in the vault, and it would make sense because in the raid, if you kill a mythic boss, you unlock that dinar reward for that mythic boss, that trinket or whatever it is. In dungeons, you clear a mythic plus 10, you unlock that mythic gear, because that's in the vault, and that's the only way that you get mythic gear in dungeons anyway. And that inherently is a problem with how mythic track gear is acquired in Mythic Plus, and we're gonna talk about it in a second. First of all, know that I think you are wrong, and you can tell me why I am wrong down below in the comments. So you cannot compare Mythic Plus rewards with raids on a one-to-one basis, period. No matter what side of the argument you are, no matter what we are actually talking about, because of course Mythic raiding is slightly more difficult in terms of preparation and coordination, because you need 20 more people and you're locked as 1 loot per week, while dungeons are essentially spammable. However, Mythic raid has way more sources of mythic gear, and Mythic raiders will gear themselves way quicker than Mythic Plus people, despite the fact that you can spam dungeons. And they don't just gear themselves way quicker, they gear themselves extremely fast compared to Mythic Plus players. And I would know because I was a Mythic raider all the way up to like 8 out of 9 Nero bar in Ansurek. I didn't kill Ansurek, but that's fine, that's not the point. I'm just saying that I've cleared almost the entirety of the raid, and I do this almost every patch with the exception of this one because I'm kind of taking a break from raiding at the moment, and now I'm seeing what it means to be on the other side where I just do dungeons, and I've been doing plus 10 since week 1. Essentially all of my vaults this season from dungeons have been myth track level, and I still don't have a proper myth track weapon. I don't have myth track pieces in my tier sets. I don't have myth track rings. I don't have myth track necklaces, and I don't have myth track trinkets. As a main that's been filling up his vaults with plus 10s in dungeons the entire season, and also has done about a month of raiding. So yeah, Mythic Plus is not a good source of acquiring mythic gear, and the Dinars being able to only give you the trinkets is not enough. And now, also unlocking this gear at plus 10 is a little bit too early. We cannot, of course, compare one-to-one with raids, but we can probably agree that a one-armed bandit on Mythic raid that rewards the House of Cards, which is one of the best trinkets for the majority of the players, is way harder than any dungeons on plus 10. Of course, the trinket itself is way better than any mythic trinket that you can acquire from dungeons. So I guess the difference lies in the explanation right there. But as a mythic raider, plus 12s, I can tell you for sure, it's more akin to the difficulty that you might encounter as a player in the early, let's say 3-4 bosses of the raid, in a normal raid scenario, not necessarily with Styx being the hardest 4th boss of any raid ever made. And also the difference between a hero track trinket to a myth track trinket, if somebody's arguing that they should get it at a plus 10 and not a plus 12, is a very marginal increase in DPS, less than 1% for me because I have all hero track trinkets, also Bis on Windwalker, and the myth track versions of those are about 1% or less in terms of pure upgrade power. That's not enough to justify having them on plus 10, because the argument of people doing it on plus 10 is that they cannot do it on plus 12s. And if you cannot do plus 12s or not intending to do plus 12s at all, why would you need the myth track gear? And I'm not here trying to say what gear you are entitled to, what gear you should be getting, and what you should want and what you don't deserve. That's not the point I'm saying. And I will show you some things with my Windwalker Monk, which is my main at the moment, currently having equipped the House of Cards on hero track and the Seaphorium Peacekeeper, I believe, on also hero track. I have done some sims regarding the myth track versions of both of these trinkets and the overall gear from Mythic Raid and Mythic Plus. If they would all be myth track 6 out of 6, of course we're gonna have 8 out of 8 tracks later on, but that's not the point. The point is the upgrade power from a hero track to a myth track trinket is relatively small. It's about 1% or less. For my Windwalker, of course, it would differ from person to person. So it's not that big of a deal, and the difference is not that high between myth track trinkets from Mythic Plus and myth track trinkets from Raid. Of course, this will be slightly different from other specs that would value the Raid ones way higher, and this is a problem of balance and tuning, which can be fixed by just simple knobs and tuning that we've already seen the devs address trinkets by now. And also, just as recording of this video, they've announced a new article addressing some buffs to Soul Letting Ruby, and I believe one of the candle trinkets. I don't know if the buffs are enough, but there are buffs that are trinkets, and they could probably still do this as well for Signet of the Priory, for Seaphorium Peacekeeper, and all of these dungeon trinkets, just to bring them more close to the Raid 1, so people are not incentivized to farm the Raid Mythic bosses for their best trinkets, and feel content with the Mythic Plus versions of those, or whatever the dungeons actually reward us. That is in that category as to why it's okay that this happens at a plus 12. So it would make sense to add an extra layer of rewards from plus 12s and higher, and we can get into the discussion of if Mythic Plus is actually unlocking enough myth track gear for you, because something that people don't understand too much about gear and sims, if you want to look at some of my sims right now, and the weapons, for example, are definitely the biggest upgrade possible that you can get, and it doesn't even matter if it's from raid or dungeons, the power gain is almost just as high, while the trinkets are incredibly minor. Another thing that people don't understand when it comes to mythic gear being awarded for Mythic Plus is that yes, getting trinkets is really good because they're biz, but what you really want is pieces in your tier slots, and essentially slots that give you stamina and main stat, because stamina cannot be simmed, armor cannot be simmed, and the problem that Mythic Plus players will encounter way quicker than Mythic Raiders is they will just get one shot. Whether you like to admit it or not, Mythic Plus scales way higher than Mythic Raids because it's the nature of the content, it's endlessly scaling, and if any part of the two content is in this argument and discussion, Mythic Plus players need the best gear possible because they end up mathematically needing more numbers than the Mythic Raiders. And the fact that you only get one item per week and that item is random in 3 slots is definitely not enough, because you could be like Marcelian, who has been looting rings, wrists, and belts for 7 straight vaults. I swear to God, this man is the most unluckiest person I have ever seen loot a vault in the game at the moment, outside of people that just get the same item duplicated in all of the slots. And this is how we can see the problem with Mythic track gear being rewarded for people who just do dungeons, and the Dinars are just a pure example of that. Since getting myth track gear in chests at the end of a dungeon is just not the same as getting them in raid, because you can spam them all the time. But if we're gonna only get myth track gear from the vaults as dungeon players, let us be able to loot all 3 slots, and maybe just to kind of compensate for that, increase the amount of dungeons that we need to clear to unlock those. The vault and the dinar system are perfect systems for raiders because they offer a bad luck protection for a system that has more or less targeted loot. A boss has about 4 or 5 items that you can specifically target and essentially get, and if you're unlucky, you can fill those empty slots in your gear with vault pieces that you can get another choice or another roll or another chance at getting, which is very similar to how we used to have those reroll coins back in the day, the Seal of Fates or whatever you want to call them. That's essentially the vault now. And we have the same for dungeons, but dungeons don't actually reward Mythic gear. So no matter what the dungeons get, it's essentially the only source of gear, and that's not what the purpose of the vault was initially supposed to be. And this whole idea that raiders are entitled to the best gear in the game and Mythic Plus people are not is just way too old, way too outdated, and definitely doesn't keep up with how the endgame has progressed over the years. I'm not saying Mythic Plus players should get Mythtrack House of Cards or the Jaster's Diamond from Gallywix. Just give us best eye level from the actual dungeons, just like how the Dinars are getting the gear for us right now. And if the Dinar system has showed us anything, is that there's still an issue with the gearing progression in WoW, especially for people who just want to push dungeons. Since WoW is no longer just a raiding game, it hasn't been a raiding game for a very long time. There are way more people doing dungeons than are doing raids, and dungeons are the backbone of keeping WoW alive, whether you like to admit it or not, since they're the replayable part of the content, not raiding, and the numbers say it as such. And I'm tired of having the discussion over and over and over again for people who feel like their ego and their validation as raider is being threatened by people who want to play Mythic Plus dungeons and want equally good and strong gear just as raiding does. Clearly there's an issue here, clearly something needs to be done. Maybe we don't have the best solutions right now, but maybe you do, so let us know in the comment section down below. What would the ideal version of Dinars or Vault rewards or eye level rewards from dungeons and raids would be? And maybe Blizzard will take notice and improve the game even more, because right now we're actually doing really well in terms of World of Warcraft content. And hey, listen, you can also check this video out and see the debate that Marcelian and I had over Unholy and Balanced Druid as meta specs for dungeons, whether or not you should always invite them to your group or understand exactly why they push higher keys and maybe not be as good in lower keys.